and and uh, and let's go. If my computer, yeah, it calibrates. So as you know, we're going to have the first training event under um, uh, task 1.3. It's a level 2 event, which is a thematic, is not on a product of B-WaterSmart, but is of relevance for several partners and participants in the project. Today, we are concentrating on some guidance on the building of a B-WaterSmart assessment system. We are going to focus very much on the B-WaterSmart assessment framework, but we are also going to provide general information about building other assessment systems or subsystems, whatever we want to call it, under B-WaterSmart. We need to be aligned. We need to follow common principles wherever we are going to talk about the B-WaterSmart framework or other assessment frameworks that we need to work at within B-WaterSmart. So as you know, the trainers today are going to be myself in this first part, more based on the slides, and Adriana that's going to run the hands-on exercise with you. So the outline of today's session is after an introduction about assessment systems. And for those who were already in the previous session, sorry for some repetition, but well, as we have some people that were not in the first session, and well, the things are not going to be presented exactly the same way, are not the same slides, although the same concepts, obviously. So there will be some level of repetition in this point one. But anyway, I'll try to make it straight to the point and as synthetic as possible. We are going to cover how to define assessment criteria. We already talked a lot about that, but just to recap the basics, and then go to the essence of this session, how to define metrics. I'm going to talk a little bit about data accuracy and reliability, assessment and implications, on how to set reference values and targets, reporting evaluation of results, avoiding common mistakes, a hands-on exercise, and discussion. I'd like to give some attention to these avoiding common mistakes because I believe that these may help us, all of us, well, trying really to avoid very common mistakes while defining performance indicators or assessment indicators. So the intent that after this training event, all of you feel more comfortable in the understanding and selecting adequate assessment criteria, metrics, and reference values and targets, and have a more clear understanding of these several concepts, help you interpret the results of the application of an assessment system, and to deal with accuracy and reliability issues. Starting then with the introduction to assessment systems, I'd like to very quickly remind the definition of water smartness, our definition, the B-WaterSmart definition of water smartness. And when we talk about whatever assessment systems that we're going to define, to develop, to work out within the project, we need to have always this definition in our minds. So these frameworks always ultimately need to achieve a water smartness society. And so we need to have this definition, these principles, these aims, these goals as our guidance in the core of our work, whatever the level of work we are developing are going to be. Again, reminding the scope, reminding for those who were in the morning, the scope of the B-WaterSmart framework, the strategic framework. Now I'm talking really about the B-WaterSmart framework. It has four main areas that are identified as the scope. So it's being developed in order to be able to support the Living Lab problem owners in their strategic objective-oriented strategic planning process, and objective-oriented and B-WaterSmart objective-oriented strategic planning process. We also want it to be applicable to assist the Living Lab owners and practitioners to assess gains of possible different strategies, different strategic paths, to understand what are the potential or actual gains from going into one direction or the other direction, be going to the past or trying to predict and then simulate and understand what are the potential gains going in one direction or the other direction. It also aims to help policymakers and decision makers overcome existing barriers and to implement their strategic agendas. So, as you know, B-WaterSmart, we are working with cities in one case, regions in the other case, region strategic agendas or city strategic agendas involving not only the B-WaterSmart partners, but other stakeholders. And so this strategic agenda will benefit a lot from using this framework, trying to really analyze the potential different paths and help monitoring the implementation of the different strategic agendas in the different cities and regions. And also, last but not least, enable benchmarking by providing a minimum set of metrics that can be used for comparisons. So whatever metric that we select, we'll always need to have into account that is aimed to support decision making and to allow comparisons, being them comparisons in the same region or city or sub-region over time, or over different possibilities of different strategies, or between regions or between cities. So any metric must be adequate to allow for comparisons. So now in a figure, what is the B-WaterSmart Assessment Framework designed for? To help set up and monitor city or region strategic agendas, to support public policies and policies set up and monitoring, to help the organizations design and develop and implement their strategic planning processes, to organization operational management, to general statistics or reporting, maybe, to stakeholder awareness and engagement. So the framework is aimed to support all of these potential uses, but we are going to concentrate more on the two blue ones, and this darker blue, this is where in Innovation Alliance we are going to focus our attention. So we are focusing mostly in these two, but even more in the organization strategic agenda, strategic planning use. Why are we paying so much attention to an assessment framework in the framework of B-WaterSmart? Because, at least to many of us, the framework is in the heart of the decision-making process. It's very important to have a very sound, very robust, very focused framework in order to have clear objectives, assessment criteria, and metrics, which is at the end of the day the framework itself, to help the organizations or the regions to set up diagnoses, again, very focused diagnoses compared to the objectives that we have. How far are we from the objectives? How far are we going to be if we don't do anything or if we go given path. What are so basically diagnosis, sorry, is how if we do, how are we, how far are we, and what's going to happen if we don't change anything. This is the diagnosis. It's also important to set up the targets and identify milestones in our transition path. And again, the framework is fundamental to this. The framework also helps in the production of the plan because it can really make the plan more clear in terms of what, when, where we want to be at what time, and how to get there. In the implementation, actually, it's critical in the monitoring because it's going to be the basis for the monitoring of the implementation of the plan, and of course for the revision, because it's going to allow to identify what are the weakest point, the opportunities for improvement, and so to review all the process is also fundamental. So B-WaterSmart framework is really in the heart of the decision-making processes. So we have a sequence in developing any B-WaterSmart assessment system, be it the central framework or any other complementary or more thematic frameworks. And this is not an incident that we have this sequence. We need to start by understanding the objectives, the strategic objectives if we are talking about the framework, but well, maybe more thematic or more tactical objectives or even operational objectives if we are in other levels. But we need to start by setting up the objectives prior to starting developing metrics. It's very important that we are very clear about we want the information for. It's very important to really identify the core objectives and not only groups of metrics. Maybe I'm going to make a parenthesis here. Many of you may know that the International Water Association started working in developing performance indicator systems for many years in the late 90s of last century already. So more than 20 years ago, 24 years ago, we started with this work. And if you look at the performance indicator systems of International Water Association, they are grouped by metrics, and they are not oriented, they are not objective oriented. Why? Because two main reasons. Mainly, well, the two main reasons are, one, we were still in an early stage, so these were, well, we started by then, and also because the idea was to set up a kind of dictionary where any organization, any group of people who were interested in using performance indicators, then they should work, they should define their own objectives and then select the relevant indicators for their objectives. So it was more as a dictionary. In the last version, the last edition of the PI manual of IWA, this is made very clear, the importance of really starting by developing the objectives prior to start selecting the metrics that are appropriate. We need to be very focused, and so this is really very, very important to, and here we are focused, here we are talking about water smartness. So we have, with our definition, we have our objectives well set up. And so it's very important to start with the objectives. And then when we are comfortable, of course, there is some iterations between these different steps, but starting to, as we did in B-WaterSmart. Then we move to the assessment criteria, again, as we are doing in B-WaterSmart. and assessment criteria, as you know, in practice, are the most relevant viewpoints to assess each objective. The strategic objectives are stated as general sentences, and the assessment criteria allow to have this concept more concrete. At the end of the day, what do we mean by water for all relevant uses? So it's a way of making it more concrete and to identify what are really the main aspects that we want to focus our attention, so that at the end of the day we have the key performance indicators in our framework. And only when we are comfortable about our assessment criteria, then we should move to the assessment metrics, how to measure each assessment criterion. Of course, I have one arrow in one direction here to highlight this sequence, but as I mentioned, there are iterations, and we had in B-WaterSmart. So we started by strategic objectives, we moved to the assessment criteria, and we ended up changing a lot our primary set of strategic objectives. And so, of course, there are some iterations here. But anyway, it's very important that I keep insisting for all even more thematic assessment systems, we follow this approach. I have now a slide about the relationship between the core framework of B-WaterSmart versus other potential B-WaterSmart assessment systems. If we have, and if you remember the different steps of the use of the framework, we can say that the B-WaterSmart framework is basically this part here: objectives, assessment criteria, metrics, and then the reference levels. And so at the strategic level, okay, so the framework, the main framework is at the strategic level. How does it relate to other levels in the organizations or in the set of organizations? So we need to work from the global strategic level to tactical and operational levels. When you do that, what's the relationship? We have strategies here. So in step 5, we define strategies. These strategies are the input, the main input for the tactical level of planning, where we have then more specific objectives. We need to carry out a more detailed and maybe thematic diagnosis. Maybe we have a more detailed plan, a shorter term plan, and have a similar process at the tactical level. And here to the operational level, we need to ensure a full coordination. We need to ensure that what comes out from here is the input to here, and the tactics that come from the tactical planning really are the ones that are the input for the operational planning. And we need to ensure that we have a sound feedback mechanism in order to be able to incorporate the knowledge, the feedback, the results from the lower levels in the organization or the region to improve the strategic vision and the strategy. And so it's important that whatever metrics and assessment criteria we choose here, we need to understand, and this is a very important message that I'd like to raise your attention for. When we are at the tactical planning or the operational planning levels, we need to be able to very clearly say, this is our contribution for the strategic level. So we cannot isolate the two. We need to be able to do this by doing whatever, implementing a different technique or changing a different procedure or building whatever reuse plant or system. This is how we are contributing for the strategic objectives. So this link can never be lost. if we want to be effective, of course, and we want to be consistent. It's fundamental that the lower levels always keep this very clear link with the strategic level in order to be able to give this reply. How are, with our action, contributing to the strategic objectives that we set up? If we look at other assessment criteria, more thematic, for instance, circular economy assessment or social acceptance assessment, whatever other assessment systems or subsystems or set of metrics in some way, they should always be kept coherent and full aligned with the B-WaterSmart strategic framework. They should always be objective oriented, and the assessment criteria and the metric definition shall comply with the principles and the concepts and the definitions that are set up in the deliverable 6.1. This deliverable has concepts that are quite general. They have some concepts and the principles that they are written in a way that they are written basically directed to this strategic framework, but generally they are applicable to other types of more tactical or operational or more thematic systems. So it's important that whatever is done in terms of defining metrics in the project are fully coherent with these concepts and with these definitions. So now, how to define assessment criteria? Very quickly. So we start with the B-WaterSmart suggested strategic objectives to identify 2 or 3 essential viewpoints for each one of these objectives, cross-check with the information provided by the living labs, and complete, if needed, with other key assessment criteria, analyze the gaps and eliminate overlaps, do this analysis, and return to one as appropriate and consolidate the framework. This is what we are doing right now. This is exactly where we are now in this process of consolidation the framework. So we already iterated a lot. We already feel, well, I would say rather comfortable about the strategic objectives. We have already a sound set of assessment criteria. We are now in the process of consolidating them, merging to have them as synthetic, but as broad and meaningful as possible. So we are now in this iterative process, but already in the consolidation, in a very sound consolidation process of the assessment criteria. How to define metrics? Well, when we think of a metric, so we have here some general rules that apply individually and then to the set of metrics that we are going to select or to define as a whole. So looking individually to each metric. So it's fundamental that it really fits to the predefined assessment criteria. So it's important that we don't include the metrics just because, oh, it's feasible, it's nice, well, I like this metric, I already have it, I have the data. No, it's fundamental to be very critical and really to ensure that the metrics we're going to select are those who are more meaningful for the assessment criteria that we have predefined. Well, not excluding, of course, this possibility of iterative process, but as a general principle, let's go to the essential and fit to the predefined assessment criteria and not be too creative. The other thing is that any metric and any assessment, any metric needs to be very clearly defined with a very concise meaning, even though it may be qualitative, not necessarily numeric. It may not be materialized into a figure, maybe level, maybe just a qualitative metric, but we need to be very clear about how we define it. It's very important that two organizations or two different people, when they read that metric, they understand exactly what we're talking about and are able to assess it based on the definition that we're going to provide. So again, this is very, very important that we are able to reach that level within B-WaterSmart. Another very important principle is that any metric needs to be reasonable, achievable. So sometimes we have some, some aspirations, some aspects that we think, oh, we are going to measure this, but at the end of the day, this is not feasible. And if we conclude that this is not feasible, we'd rather be modest enough to change and to go to another metric that maybe is not so ideal from the conceptual point of view, but is achievable and will really in practice provides the information we need for the decision-making process. Please never forget that at the end of the day, what we want to do is to support well-grounded decisions based on these metrics. So they need to be reasonable, achievable. Then I point out be auditable. So for some systems, it's fundamental that the systems, the metric systems are auditable by external auditors. That's the case, for instance, of assessment systems by regulators, for instance. But so it's not the case in B-WaterSmart. But anyway, it's very important that we think when we design the B-WaterSmart system, it's important that we think of it as it were a must that the system were auditable, because this really helps to have these clear defined definitions, to have procedures that are clear where to get the information and what are the process in order to get the information, so that what we get is something that doesn't cause any confusion in those who assess or those who interpret the result. Another important thing is that the metrics should be as independent from the particular conditions of the living labs as possible. So here I'd like to make, with regard to this as universal as possible, I'd like to make a difference between two things that are embedded here. One thing is that there may be some specific aspects that may be more important for one living lab than for other living labs. And so it's important that the living labs have the freedom in order to select the metrics that are more meaningful for them and really are more important for their decision-making processes. That's fair enough. But it's also important at the same time that the metrics that we are going to include in the framework are metrics that are potentially usable by living labs outside the B-WaterSmart and are really as universal as measures, as metrics are as universal as possible. Well, another very, very critical aspect is that all the metrics should be as simple and easy to understand as possible. If we're going to metrics that are very sophisticated in terms of the calculation or in terms of the understanding of the interpretation, at the end of the day, they're going to work as black boxes and they are not going to be really useful in practice. So the easier the concepts behind are, the better. So it's really important to have this effort of, even though we complicate it at a given stage, then boil down, have it sediment, and really go to the fundamental, go to the essential, try to make it as simple and easy to understand as possible. And we had now the example of the objectives. We started the more sophisticated, and the more we sought, the more we were able to get it more mature and to make it simple. Simple, not simplistic. It's very important to separate simple from simplistic. Simple, as I think it was quoting Einstein, if I'm not wrong, is a simple is the ultimate level of sophistication. So we need to think a lot in order to be able to simplify, in order to be able to go to the core, to go to the essential. 2 points of a slightly different nature. Whenever possible, it's useful if the metrics are quantifiable, so as to provide an objective measurement of the service of our activity, avoiding personal and subjective appraisal. But anyway, especially in the scope of B-WaterSmart, we can use other types of metrics that I'm going to go to there slightly later. We may have also qualitative metrics. No problem at all about having qualitative metrics, but they need to be in any way very clearly defined. Whenever possible, it's also useful to include, when we report the information, it's also very useful to report information about the data quality of the input variables that we are using. It's completely different if you are providing a metric based on very rough estimates, or a metric that is based on very reliable and accurate data. So the way the decision-making process goes needs to take into account the accuracy of this information we are using as a basic, as a support. So now, looking at not individual metrics, but looking at the set of metrics as a whole that we're going to include in our frameworks, in our assessment systems. So globally, every assessing metrics provide information that needs to be significantly different from the other metrics in the framework. And again, going already a little bit into the very frequently made mistakes, it's very common that sometimes we are tempted to use the same information, the same data, than expressed in indicators, just using different denominators, so using different units. And so at the end of the day, we are complicating the system, creating bias, because we have the same viewpoint assessed in different ways. So it's important that we avoid overlappings and really capture the essential, but using every metric needs to have very specific added value to understanding the whole system and the whole water smartness of the system we are analyzing. So again, the assessment metrics needs to have unequivocal definitions, and only the metrics which are deemed essential for the effective framework should be kept. We have been talking about metrics. We may have different types of metrics. We may have indicators, and for those who are familiar with, for instance, the performance indicator systems of the International Water Association, we are talking about indicators. So it's a system of indicators, which is a numerical, is always assessed as a ratio between two variables, be two variables of the same nature. For instance, cubic meters divided by cubic meters, and so it is a dimensionless indicator. As a ratio or as a percentage, or maybe a ratio between different variables of different nature, and then it's more of an intensity. An indicator may be expressed as a kind of intensity, and where the denominator allows to eliminate the the size, the dimension of the case we are looking at. For instance, total cubic meters, or total length, or total area, or total number of households, or things like that, tends to be the type of denominator that we're using when we are using these intensity indicators. But I'll come to that later on. The indices, but well, an important thing is that the indicators do not have a judgment in themselves, incorporated in themselves. The indicators are, as I said, intensity or ratios, and we need to have, outside of them, we need to have reference values in order to be able to judge them, in order to say, yes, this is good, this is okay, this is more or less. The indices may have already, sometimes they may be not necessarily a ratio, may be assessed in different ways, not necessarily a ratio. Maybe, for instance, the reply to different questions with grades, and maybe the sum of the replies to different questions, or maybe a function of different things. And in some cases, the indices may already incorporate a judgment in themselves. So we may compare in the function, in the definition itself, we may already be comparing with some kind of reference level. And so the indices sometimes already have, or most times, have already a judgment implicit to it. When you look at the outcome, we already know how well or how poor, how fair or good we are in a given aspect. The levels are typically qualitative grades, where we have, well, categories where we are saying we are good, we are fair, we are poor, for instance. So we have grades, and they may come for operating the indicators, and maybe a more aggregated way of showing in indicators or indices results, or they may come directly from qualitative metrics, inquiries, or, well, whatever. So they may be more qualitative as well. So these are the three types of metrics that we have in general, and then we are open to include in the B-WaterSmart framework as potential metrics. Then how many metrics? We already heard Rita and Steph often saying that we shouldn't have more than 2 or 3 metrics per assessment criteria. It's important to go to the core. But anyway, we often are faced with the question, is the more aspects covered explicitly the better, or no? If we go just to a very small number, we may leave important things outside. So where is the balance? Where is the balance between many metrics and covering everything, or everything that we think may be of interest, or fewer metrics but maybe going to a more essential thing? Where is the balance? Well, typically when we start, and I have seen working in performance assessment system for 30 years now, I have seen this even with myself, of course, especially in the first years, so often. We start often with no ideas, with a lamp turned off, no ideas. Then we start with a brilliant idea. Oh, I have an idea. Very good, very nice. Then, and this is the issue, everybody starts having nice ideas, and nice ideas, and nice ideas. And we tend to go to nothing, to too many nice ideas. Please remember that if we have too many nice ideas, we end up with a lamp that is off again. So it's really very, very important that after this brainstorming, after having many nice ideas, really go again to the core and have as few indicators as possible, as simple as possible, always relevant to the assessment criteria, kept to the essential, transparent, robust, and feasible to assess by the living lab owners. So let's be very practical, very realistic, and let's keep to the essential. After all these discussions that are very fruitful and are essential, I mean, we need to really to have this brainstorm and have inputs and understand everything that's going on in order to be able to be based then to have this simplification that is not oversimplifying. We need to have the broad panoramic in order to be able then to grab to take on board just the most important things. We need to have this broader and even chaotic thoughts in the middle. It's part of the process, and it's very important for the process. So a word about data accuracy and reliability, just briefly. My experience is really much more important to have good data rather than having many data. And the same thing applies to the indicators. So it's very important to have fewer indicators, but really have a good control of the input data that we are using. To have a good attention about the quality of the input data and assess that quality, not only select data that are as good as possible, but also assess the quality of that data is very important. And the IWA performance indicator system, we suggest two different measures of assessing the data quality. Is the data accuracy and the data reliability. It may be a little bit confusing, but let me maybe exemplify with a case. Imagine that you have a very sophisticated equipment that is very accurate, that is able to measure a given parameter in a very, very accurately, but that imagine also that this equipment is highly sensitive to changes in outside temperature, to rain, to wind, to whatever. So it's very accurate, but it's very it's unreliable because it fails often, very frequently, because it's very sensitive to the outside conditions, weather conditions, for instance. So it can be simultaneously very accurate and very unreliable. So when we talk about data accuracy, we are really looking at how many significant numbers, figures we have in a given numerical data, for instance. What is the accuracy of that number, for instance? The reliability relates to the source. Where are we generating this information from? Are we extrapolating? Are we the reliability is not the data reliability itself, but it's the reliability of the data source. So the data quality can, in an easy way, be reported using this combination of these two sources of information, data accuracy and data source. And this quality measure is a quality that relates to the variables, to the input data, and not to the metrics themselves. And I think realistically, we'd better forget about assessing the quality of the metrics, because this is a bit complex, and I think this is not appropriate to go in that direction, especially using qualitative metrics as well. So I think it's not appropriate that we try to assess the quality of the metrics themselves. But I would strongly advise everybody to look and try to assess the quality of the input data. When we are communicating the report of our results to the outside, to the society abroad, to non-technical persons, maybe it's more appropriate, instead of using this type of representation that I showed, exemplifying the IWA performance indicator system, maybe easier if we have just a grading saying, oh, this is reliable information, this is fair, and well, this is not so good, or this is not so good quality data that we are using to assess that metric. So maybe easier to communicate with the society using simplified. This is an example, but with a more simplified and a more intuitive way to communicate these quality aspects of the data. So this is the main message I had. We had with regard to data accuracy. Rita then may confirm, but as far as I know, I think there is it is not thought that the B-WaterSmart framework itself contains a slot for reporting the accuracy of data variables. At least, we haven't discussed that.
No, we don't plan. No, we don't plan that. But in deliverable 6.1, I promise that we are giving guidance on how to do it.
Yeah. So thank you for the confirmation, Rita. This was my what I had in mind. But anyway, I wanted to confirm that with you. Thank you very much. So regardless of being or not being in the framework or being in the framework, so it's important that everybody who is applying really has very clear procedures of how to collect the information and how to assess and report the data quality of the variables that you are using and inputs. So now let's move to how to set reference values and targets. Reference values are the judgment of how good, fair, and poor for each metric and for the stakeholders across the board. And they aim to allow for comparisons between cases or between alternative solutions or between different periods of time to monitor evolution over time. And for this reason, it's very important that this judgment is stable and independent from case to case. So this is something that we evolved even at LANEC. In the beginning, we were not differentiating reference values and targets until the time that we saw that it was really a need to differentiate these two concepts. The targets are by nature something that evolve over time. The reference levels need to be stable. I used to give a concrete example, that is, if we go, for instance, if we're going to travel and we're going to select an hotel, we want to understand what is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-star hotels. And this classification is completely independent from our own objectives. My objective when I travel is not to go to a 5-star hotel because of my income, because of my preferences, because the value I give to the place I sleep. So my target, my objective is not to go to a 5-star hotel, but I want to know whether an hotel is a 5-star, and I'm not going to convert a 2 or 3-star hotel into a 5-star hotel just because my objective is to look for an hotel of that category. So this categorization, this global judgment needs to be stable. And we need to allow for comparisons in different times and different cases. So this is what we mean by reference values. Need to be low for comparisons and be independent from our specific case and baseline. This is the reference values may be set up based on theoretical concepts behind the metrics. When we look at the definition of the metric, we can deduce, we can conclude what are the adequate reference values. We also may take into account European legislation or regulation or standardization, literature reviews, best practices, statistical analysis when we don't have, so we may go to the median, to the quartiles and have a first grasp of what we're talking about. We may also take into account expert judgments, and also maybe use the opinion of the strategic level representatives of the living labs. Anyway, this is a sequence, and this is a sequence that makes sense. So whenever it's possible to go to something that is really a conceptually sound, let's use what is conceptually sound, and then go down to the options that we have. Sometimes we have a combination of different of them in order to have a consensus about the reference levels that are more adequate to each metric. Targets are a different thing. The targets are really defined case to case and have a time allocated to it. We may have short-term target for a given place and a medium-term target and a long-term target. The targets not only evolve on time, but also they depend on the results of the diagnosis. They depend on the baseline. They depend on the ambition. They depend on the resources that can be mobilized, and the decision makers want to are prepared to mobilize. They also depend on the effectiveness of the strategy implementation. But in summary, they should be ambitious, but they should be realistic. They really need we need to have our feet on the ground to understand where we are now, where we want to be, but what are the resources needed to get there, to make sure that we are able to mobilize these resources in order to get there at the time we aim to get there. So we need to be very realistic while defining our targets. So the target is something that is carried out only after the diagnosis stage is carried out. Reporting and evaluation of the results. I have just one slide for these, and this is the slide that Rita already showed this morning. So, of course, the reporting of the water framework results can be made in many different ways. But the message I want to convey here, it's very important that we don't lose the track. So it's important that we always present in a nutshell, in a very summarized, in a A4 at the maximum, or at the screen at the maximum, we are able to present what are our strategic objectives, what are the corresponding assessment criteria, what are the results of the metrics that we got in the diagnosis. And here, if we have these grading colors, green, that it's okay, yellow, it's fair. So this is good, this is fair, this is poor, comparing the results to our reference levels. And so looking at that, we can understand what are the main areas, the main objectives, the main assessment criteria, and the main metrics that are having problems. And then we may look at that and wisely say, okay, so this is what I have. Okay, so there is a need to tackle, to address priority. These are my aspects of main concern. So I'm going to define a strategy in order to improve these aspects, and another strategy to address these aspects, and another strategy to address these ones. So it's important to understand what are the link between the strategies that we end up including in our strategic plans and in our strategic agendas with the actual situation that we have. So avoiding common mistakes, and I need to move, otherwise Adriana won't have time and you won't have time for the and so on exercise. So let's move to the avoiding common mistakes. Examples of very common made mistakes. One of the most commonly made mistakes is to use variables instead of metrics. So number of jobs, volume of reused water, for instance, they are just examples of things that we see very, very frequently as they were mistakes, as they were metrics. And they are not metrics. Why? Because they don't allow for comparing, for instance, two different cases. If we compare a small case and a big case, and it's natural that the number of jobs of the volume is different. So we need to compare what is comparable. So we need to convert this type of thing into an intensity or a ratio, if we're talking about indicators or in an index. For instance, possible alternatives for the variables that I was pointing out was, for instance, a number of jobs per active total active population, or 1,000 of total active population, or annual volume of reused water divided by the annual volume of treated wastewater, for instance. So we need to find a way to find a denominator that makes sense, but really allows for comparing different cases and comparing over time when the size evolves, when the population of the region or whatever evolves over time. Another very commonly made mistake is to use a denominator that is neither stable nor changes at the same pace as the numerator. And I'm going to give you a very, very common, very widely used example of physical water losses. It's very common to use physical water losses as the volume of in cubic meters of water losses per year, for instance, divided by the annual water consumption. Well, as you know, percentage of water losses is a very commonly used mistake as well, but to express leakage. But leakage in terms of percentage is completely wrong. And one of the reasons, there are several, but one of the reasons is because the annual water consumption is not related or directly related with the physical water losses. The water losses depends on the condition of the physical system, depends on the leaks, and depends on the pressure. Doesn't depend on the flow that flows in the system. And so if, for instance, there is one year that is a warmer year and the consumption raises, and then there is a very wet year and the colder year where the consumption goes down, the physical water losses may be kept exactly the same and the indicator will going to vary. And this doesn't tell us anything about the performance. So it's very important to make sure that we choose denominators that are really meaningful, that are either stable or change in the same pace proportionally to the numerator. Another very commonly made mistake is the confusion between metrics and context characteristics. For instance, annual precipitation per year, even in millimeters, so that it's comparable in terms of, well, it's not the total liters, but millimeters, it's already divided by area. It's not, this is a context information. This is a characteristic. This is not something that changes with our decisions. So we should only consider in our frameworks the type of metrics that are directly influenced by our decisions, that depend on our decisions, and we can change with our decisions. So these are the performance metrics, the assessment metrics that are eligible for our framework. And the other thing is that do not comply with all the requirements previously shown in the previous slides, and then the definitions that are in the level 6.1.1. So please, prior to suggesting a metric, please go to the level 1.6.1 and check whether it's compatible with these definitions. Sometimes there are too many metrics, too complex to assess, non-essential, not adequate to measure the corresponding assessment criteria, and so on and so forth. So these are examples of frequently made mistakes. So we are now going to move to the hands-on exercise. We had half an hour for the hands-on exercise, so I think we are okay with the time with that point of view. But anyway, Diane is going to follow up. Prior to that, I would perhaps leave and stop sharing and allow you to make any questions or comments or whatever at this stage. Please just go ahead and ask without well.
I don't have comment. I just want to congratulate because I was really following with a lot of interest the presentation and also the clarity of the explanation. So thank you very much for that, Elena. From my side, it was everything very clear.
Yeah, Rita, but well, it's if it would be a disaster if you wouldn't understand what I'm saying, because you are teaching this for many years. So I think that the issue is to know, and please do not have any problem in telling me that I was not clear for those who are more
Sure.
new to the thing. So sorry, Rita, but well, so of course I'm grateful for your kind words. But
you pass the exam then. If I'm teaching that, you pass the exam with the full mark.
Yeah, but the important thing is please do not have any hesitation in telling me, no, I don't agree, or no, you were not clear, if you are not so familiar with this type of thing or logics.
Well, this was really very clarifying. Like brain synapses firing off. Very clarifying, even for other things in terms of structure and the logic of thinking and planning. And there are very some tricky parts that are sometimes not easy. For instance, this tendency to mix variables with metrics. This was very important to highlight, because I think this is really very common. And well, in the social sciences, sometimes we are not so used to work with monitoring and assessment. And it's sometimes difficult to balance the qualitative, the quantitative, and especially in the field of governance. I think we are in face of a challenge here in B-WaterSmart, because, can you hear me? My network is kind of flaky today. We have been discussing the governance assessment in more detail with staff, with SINTEF, because we are building on an existing system from KWR that has been used in different countries and regions. It's published in multiple papers, but I still have to explore that further, but that, as I understood, it's based on interviews and in assessments of the researchers. So the researchers are the ones who, there's a scale of evaluation in terms of imaging authority. Some items that are not that easy to evaluate because they are quite subjective. They require an evaluation, a personal evaluation of the researcher, but this also, there is always a degree of subjectivity. I think this is going to be the main challenge.
Yeah, of course. Thank you very much, Carla. Of course, well, I'm an engineer, Adriana is an engineer, Rita is an engineer, so we have to think in terms of how many bricks fit in this thing. So we may be too much square, so to say, in a square-minded, as we used to say, at least in Portuguese. I don't know whether this is general in other languages, but we tend to say that we are sometimes a bit square-minded. We want to translate everything in a very quantitative way. And so it's really important to have this balance between the two mindsets. But I believe that our experience, and particularly thinking now, expressing out now in terms of LANEC, we have been working for many years in many different assessment systems. So we know how many, we are really fine-tuned to very frequently made mistakes. And we know the consequences of making some of these mistakes. So I think we have the duty, in order to call the attention, to avoid that we are making the same mistakes that we know that are mistakes that are going to pay back later on. So I think that this conversation between the persons with different mindsets will bring to a stable and to a mature, well, to a good compromise between these two square-minded people that are engineers, for those that are typically social minded people, so to say. Sorry for the lack of accuracy in terms of language. One thing, the fact that there are a lot of papers, and especially if we're talking, sorry for not being polite now, but especially if we're talking about scientific papers, it's very frequent. When I look at some of the scientific papers, I read at them, I look at them and say, it's very, very evident that this has never been used in practice as a decision-making tool, as a routine decision-making tool. Sometimes they are very well grounded and very well experienced. Sometimes they're not so much tested in terms of being really something that's going to be used, and we want to be used again and again. So we need to have these very practical, and here the living labs have an essential role to make sure that all of us, the researchers, and I'm a researcher, as you know, so that all the researchers come down to the earth and do not dream too much, and well, end up with something that is really realistic and kept to the essential. So I'm very positive. It's you are going to challenge us in order to help finding the right metrics, and here we are to think together and to co-produce something that I'm confident that's going to be a very good result. Right, Rita? And right, Adriana, and right, the rest of the team. Any other comment?
Maria is raising the hand. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I hadn't noticed. Yes.
Yes. So thank you, Elena, for this clear explanation about the framework and also the metrics. It's will be very useful for us to establish the good indicators from the circular economy point of view, attending this criteria or this assessment to be the final list of the circular economy. So for be more practical about the coordination with the output of the deliverable 4.2 in our cases, in the work package 4, about the list of the circular economy indicators in the context of the B-WaterSmart project for reapplying for the different living labs. We are doing now, we have done a review, as you know, and this is a very extensive review. This is was constructed taking into account the different sources, the validated sources, like for example, IWA, but also the ISO or the different OECD, so the different very extensive list. And we are now doing the synthesization about this list of indicators, taking into account the criteria about the different living labs. But now, of course, we need to establish or maybe complement this list of indicators with the strategic objectives and also the assessment criteria. So I think that we need to work together with Work Package 6 about this statement of this strategic. I think that the issue is the time, because we need to have the list of indicators, the final list of indicators for September, October, because we need to deliver the deliverable for 2 at the beginning November for the validation. And I think that we can construct this first review about the circular economy indicators, attaching the strategic objectives and the assessment criteria for more operational point of view. But I think that, Rita, maybe with you, we can define how the Work Package 4 can complement the final list of the metrics in the case of the Work Package 6 to be more complement and to taking into account in the context of the B-WaterSmart project. So the idea, maybe we can arrange another specific, more operational meeting, because we want to stay until today to have this as final list of the criteria assessment and specific objectives to establish this work. And we have collected more or less the input from the other living labs about the workshop that we did it in the context of the work package 4. So maybe next week, we can arrange another specific meeting to establish how we can complement or what is expected from the work package 4 about this list of indicators for work package 6.
Yeah, may I'm not a member of WP4 team, so
but people from LENEC is attending.
Yeah, I know, but then myself. So I'm not part of the, and I don't want to create noise in this regard. But I had a look at the indicators, and I think you did a great job in compiling so many sources and grouping them by well, having groups, not objectives but groups, because in terms of the state of the art, this makes all the sense for me. I mean, to have groups and have, well, what we compile, this was for this group, these were the indicators that we compile. So the listing that you showed makes all the sense for me in terms of the compilation, in terms of the state of the art. So if I were leading this process, but well, it's just a suggestion, well, if I were going to take that on board, the first thing I would do was, well, to have a note to see this is really indicator or no, because you can see in the literature, in many other, there are many things that are really not performance indicators. They're not indicators, they're not metrics, the way we are defining them. But anyway, the concept behind may be relevant. So maybe we may want to capture the idea, maybe not expressed like that. So I would perhaps add some columns saying, no, this fits the definition, or this doesn't fit the definition, but has something that is really value that we want to capture. I would kind of analyze this type of thing. But now I would start from a top-down approach, saying now what are, in terms of circularity, in the scope of B-WaterSmart, what are the objectives, what are the assessment criteria, and now that I have all this listing, let me try to pick up the relevant metrics from that long list. So now I wouldn't come bottom up. I would start now a top down in order to try to close the loop. If I were doing the job, I think I would adopt this approach, but of course it's up to the team to decide the way to go. Sorry, Adriana, I'm really sorry for having taken more time, but anyway, I think this discussion was relevant as well. Yeah. So I'll pass directly.
Yeah, we had a period of discussion. We anticipated. It's okay. Rita and Mario are also with the raised hand.
Yeah, I simply wanted to answer to Mari. Somehow Elena anticipated already because, you know, I agreed to have a meeting to follow up this. I just wanted to wait until today because I knew today you were going to have a kind of a overview of also the current status of the objective and assessment criteria, where we still have to work. It's not a final version, but you see is evolving now. And then to have, before we talk, to have this training with Elena and Adriana. So when it comes to when to have this meeting, then I think next week can be too early because I think you need to do a bit of job to come up with the suggestions in a way. So again, my suggestion was exactly the same as Elena, to have this now. We are the very high level of resolution of your indicators. We have an indicative list of assessment criteria with the explanation of what they should be covered. And of course, you don't have to take all the decision, but at least select those that might be options of metrics connected with those assessment criteria. And then I think it's a good moment to meet. That was all.
Okay, thank you.
Mario, I don't know if you have some question. or comment? No. So maybe we will proceed, and then if something needs to be discussed afterwards, to finish the session, we will give this opportunity. So I will share my screen. We have prepared the hands-on exercise, and here we will request your contributions, so your participation on this exercise, to have your inputs. They are two exercises, one more dedicated to the criteria and the other one to the metrics. And we will use the Mentimeter in order to collect your inputs. I think it is an easy way. I hope that everything goes okay. I think it's simpler when we are presential meetings, but I will try to have this online. So I will request you to log in on the www.menti.com. We can use your PC or mobile, and introduce these codes. And in this first exercise, we will identify from these listed aspects those that are criteria, and simultaneously describe the objective of environmental sustainability. What could be the points of view to assess environmental sustainability? So I will ask if you can assess the Menti, and you have these questions available to answer. And I can put the full screen in this one. Okay, so we will see what are your answers online. So the answer is just to set the yes or no in this case. I have here two answers, three.
Is anybody having trouble in replying, or it's just a matter there that you are still in the process?
Okay. So 8 answers. Maybe we can try to have here some discussion on this. I have
Yeah, I think we are all, because I'm not replying, you are not replying, so everybody replied.
Yeah, I have another set. Maybe I will try to. Elena, what do you recommend to discuss these ones or try to complete
It's up
these?
to you. You are the boss.
Yeah. Okay.
Adriana.
Maybe. Yes.
Good morning, everyone. Perhaps it's better that you do it now, because then it's difficult to go back to the to the graphs.
Yes, that's why the reason I prefer, in order to avoid some problems. Okay, so there are here some answers regarding the protection of public health and safety. The protection of I don't know who have chosen these criteria, but in fact this is an objective, is not really a point of view of environmental sustainability. So this addresses a different objective. Of course, the use of energy, environmental resources, pollution prevention, carbon neutrality is directly related, are points of view, perspectives of environmental sustainability. But looking now also to the system expansion and certification, these aspects are more actions than points of view. So when you select the system expansion, you will expand your system in order to have or to reach something. For itself, it's not an objective, it's not a point of view, and the same for the certification. I don't know if you have some comments or some different understanding on this, just to clarify.
I think you can move.
Yeah, okay. So I will move now to the final list. So it's just to select yes or no also for these aspects, and also related to environmental sustainability, which could be criteria to assess this objective. Is it available already on your, yeah, okay. Okay, now it's getting faster. Okay, so in these aspects, when you look for the protection of water bodies, I think there is no doubt that it is a viewpoint of the environmental sustainability. But when we look for infrastructural sustainability or sustainability of service provision, here there are different dimensions or different objectives that could be associated to this. So they could complement the assessment system, but they are not really a viewpoint of the environmental sustainability. And in this sense that it is important to have an assessment system completed. We could not include every objectives in the same global objective. Regarding now for the construction of the wastewater treatment plant, it is an action, so no one has selected. Regarding the discharge events, it was chosen by two of the participants. They could be addressed more as metrics because they look for a very specific point and can be quantifiable and inform this objective, to quantify this objective, not so much regarding a criteria. So I don't know if you here also have some comment or a different viewpoint to share with us.
Yeah, there was somebody. There is a comment in the chat by Carla that it's more challenging to classify them standing alone rather than in. If we see the whole set of objectives and criteria, of course, it's easier to, and metric is easier, well, to classify. That's right. But anyway, this was to illustrate types of well, rational that that we should use. And by well, looking at these results, there is something that I didn't call the attention for, and it's very important, especially when we're talking among engineers. This is one of the very common made mistakes, and I didn't refer to it, and I should perhaps, which is sometimes we confuse tactics or the process with the objectives. For us engineers, we learn in our engineering schools that, well, at the end of the day, our goal is to have a work done, a civil engineering work complete. It's our goal. If we have a wastewater treatment plants constructed, well, that's the goal. If we have a road, if we have a building, that's the objective. And we tend to forget that the objective is not to have the treatment plant, but is to, well, to safeguard the environment, is to protect. So the wastewater treatment plant is a means to reach the objective. What I mean to say is that for engineers, sometimes it's difficult not to put process. We tend to mix up objective and the process to reach the objective. We tend to think that what we are doing are the objective in itself. And we have some difficulty in talking sometimes with the elected politicians, and don't you see this is so important? Of course, this is, well, a pumping station. It's the most important thing you have, is the most important objective you may have, is to have this new pumping station. Forgetting to explain why that pumping station is really important in terms of getting the objectives of the region, the objectives of the society. And so it's important that when we are defining the metrics, we don't forget that. I think we are going in a very good way in terms of the assessment criteria. We are not having this, I haven't seen this mistake very frequently done in the process we are following. But anyway, I call the attention for it because, well, it's very common to see it around.
I think that the way that Adriana was putting it, like it's very good to think about the criteria as points of view of the objective. So it's environmental sustainability from the point of view of protection of water bodies, or environmental sustainability from the point of view of and then looking at the metrics or the indicators, or as mean, or how to know that you are filling in those points of view, and of course the actions. I mean, they are more straightforward. I mean, from construction of a wastewater treatment plant is more straightforward. We know it's an action. Sometimes actions can be tricky, like like in policy or policy definition, it's trickier to distinguish between the action and the objective. This one is a little bit easier, but the way to think about criteria as points of view is good, I think, to make the rationale and to distinguish when you're thinking about it.
Thank you, Sophia.
Thank you. So now I would like to move to exercise 1B, which is still about the criteria. And I would like you to include another code. So I will request you to include this code. And here I will need to present like that because you need to look for this assessment system and identify which common mistakes in this criteria. What type of mistakes? So no mistake. And look now for this first objective, adequacy of service provided from the point of view of service accessibility and quality of service provided to customers. And if there is a misalignment between the criteria and the objective, if there is an overlap between criteria, or if there is a lack of a viewpoint. So this first is for the first objective. Maybe, I don't know if we have time to go through the 3 objectives. I don't know. We are.
Yeah, maybe not, because, well, there has been a long day, and so I think maybe.
Yeah. Can you please make it bigger? I cannot read it properly.
The criteria, the assessment. Yes, system. Please. Okay. I will just have a look. I'm sorry, just to see how many people for. Okay. It's more difficult just to share one screen with 2 parts, but
no, you can show the other one. I have already done it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So, okay. So there is here some opinion of a lack of a viewpoint. Someone wants to suggest what viewpoint is lacking?
I chose that with the reference to the 1.2 quality of service provided to customers. Initially, I said no, that's perfect. But my point is that, as we said, the criteria have to be clear and clearly understood by everyone. I had a problem of interpretation. If I took it as a granted that we were referring that we are fulfilling the level of service, so we're saying the service provided is of the required level of service, so that is the quality. But what do we mean by quality? For me, it was is what I would justify my choice of lack of a viewpoint.
Yeah. So in your opinion, it should be more explicit what is inside the quality of services.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We don't need to split it, but maybe to have an understanding what we mean by the quality of service, like a fulfillment of a level of service. Something like that.
Yeah. Okay. So I will suggest just to move to the second one and then move to the matrix exercise. So in this objective 2, it is the sustainability of service provision, and we are included economic sustainability, efficiency in use of energy, and physical productivity of human resources. So you may look also to the third objective, but now what we are requesting for the input is regarding objective 2. It's the same code, so I think it's already, it's available already. Okay. Okay, so I think we have the answers. Who wants to identify here some misalignment?
I think for me, the physical productivity of human resources was maybe could be an indicator, or but not necessarily for sustainability of service provision. So the two first seem to be possibly good criteria for sustainability of service provision, so from an economic point of view and from an efficiency point of view. But the third one seemed to me that could be maybe included in one of these, in economic sustainability, as a indicator, but not so much as a criteria.
I like your comment, but I'm not going to comment on it.
Yes, here the point is that if you have, of course, it depends. It can be, of course, included in the economic sustainability. But I think that since we have an objective of environmental sustainability, maybe this efficiency in the use of energy should be in the third objective, and not here in the sustainability of service provision. eventually the cost of energy, something related to the cost of energy could be there, but the use maybe would be more addressed in the environmental sustainability. Regarding, yeah, Elena?
We are not going to go to the other Mentimeter for the third the third objective, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you can comment on this
the
other mismatch.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of the infrastructural sustainability, that would fit better the service provision rather than the environmental sustainability. I mean, if we want to have a sustainable service, we need to ensure that our infrastructure is sustainable as well. So the 3.3 would make more sense
in the second objective.
So
this is the lack of viewpoint. I don't know if there are some other.
Rita, you look very serious. You are looking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why I'm putting so much effort, but I was thinking like to me it looks completely wrong. Honestly, the 2 and 3, because let's say if we have to know which assessment framework is this and for what. So if it is about some sustainable service in general itself, then I would have an objective related with economic sustainability, the environmental sustainability, and the infrastructure sustainability as objective. But if I have an objective that is sustainability of the water service provision, and then I have an environmental sustainability objective. What I mean is that if I have a big sustainability objective, then I would put all the other elements as assessment criteria, economic, environmental. So I would say, yes, misalignment, but also a lot of work to be done to decide what is the scope of the framework itself.
Now, and if the objectives come from the regulatory system in Portugal. So it's basically the quality of service that is actually provided to the users, to the consumers. So is it adequate or no? Is it what about accessibility? What about those who are served? Do people have access to the service? Yes or no? And for those who have access, what's the quality of that service? So that's the first one. The second one is the service provided in a sustainable way, economically, physically? And the idea of having here the human resources, I agree with Sophia. The issue is that you need to have competent, and we need to have capacitated. You need to have sustainable human resources if you want to have a sustainable service. But it's very difficult to measure, and in practice, I don't like this assessment criteria. But anyway, that's it. That was an option. So, but the rationale behind is that to have a sustainable service, you would need to have adequate human resources. So you cannot afford not having competent and to address for renovation and to have adequate human resources. But this is not duly captured by these assessment criteria. Anyway, human resources come from that rationale. And then you have also wastewater services, so you need to account for environmental sustainability. Well, looking at the prevention, pollution, efficiency of use of resources, and minimizing the pollution caused by the service. So on the one hand, minimizing the resources used, and on the other hand, preventing the damage or minimizing the damage produced by the service. That's the rationale behind this. Of course, here they are mismatched, and so it's more difficult to understand the rationale because some are in the wrong position.
Yeah, so it is like a triangle: the user, the utility, and the environment. So looking for these 3 objectives. But so it was the best, but it is aligned. Here was mismatch. I don't know. We have maybe suggest one of the exercises for the metrics and then close.
Yeah,
or
we are already half an hour, almost half an hour after a long day. So maybe just a quick.
Okay.
I would suggest to choose just
one for the metrics. Okay. The first one. So here, I would like to ask you to identify from these listed aspects those that constitute performance metrics. Oh, the voting is closed. I need to open it. And the code is the one that is. It is here. I can present this.
Please look at the unit, right? While you are replying, please look at the unit to.
Okay, I think we now are less in this session. Okay, so here this is one of the points that it is a variable. So this adequacy of human resources in number. It's a variable. It is not. It doesn't allow to compare, taking into account the dimensions of the organizations. Also the failures in pumping stations. So it is a variable and not really a performance metric, because you may have more failures if you have a lot of pumping stations. So this does not dimensionalize regarding the dimension, and the other ones are okay. So, and these were the last voted, but the main reason is because of that. The yearly rehabilitation rate has here also some divisions. These may be a metric of activity rather than of a result. So it depending on the context of what you are assessing. It can be included. For instance, the regulator system includes it because it is looking for the performance of the utilities, so they should rehabilitate. But if he's in the case of a water utility,
if it is just an operator, if it is an operator without the responsibility of investing, it will be just a context information. If it is an operator, if it is an utility that has the responsibility to invest, then it may be a performance measure, because it depends on the decision of the decision maker.
Okay, I don't know if someone has some additional comment or question.
And the rehabilitation rate could also have issues with, so there might be fluctuations in the years, and a good performer might have a smaller rehabilitation rate in the years following. If they did good.
That's a very good point, Sophia, and that's a very good point. So in the case of ERSAR, and here in the B-WaterSmart, we may perhaps in some cases consider that. What we're doing is that although we advocate an annual assessment, for some indicators we are using the accumulated value for the past 5 years, for instance, in order to have a moving average, in order to eliminate these peaks that are meaningless. We advocate annual assessment, but the last 5 as the average of the past 5 years. So this is something that may make sense in some metrics.
Because it could depend on investment cycles and the tendering, the time of tendering after that. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Okay, so we need to close now. We had some more, but some are hands-on, but I think it's well, we have no time. So thank you very much for your contribution.
Eventually, we could continue, since earlier we decided to have another workshop in September for work package 6 related. We could actually use these exercises you have prepared, just to not lose them and to have them in mind, that we can find like a moment of activity and to do a bit of an exercise, just to not forget. It was nice, really nice, Adriana.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think you can stop recording, Adriana.
Yes.